Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Insights Podcast. I am your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian, and today I welcome back a fellow dietitian, John. And welcome, John. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Leona. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. So we've done another episode, right? I think we did tips to achieve your goals. If it's a weight management goal, so go back and listen to that episode. But today's episode, I think is more in relation to like specific cultural foods, right, that we can still add. So Filipino specifically, Filipino culture. And so because, John, you see a good amount of clients, right, that are Filipino background.
Yes, exactly.
So I wanted to focus that specifically, right, as a Hispanic myself, right, one of the reasons why I got into nutrition is because of my grandma. So my grandma has diabetes, and this is back, I was in high school, so I don't know, many years ago. She would go to the doctor, and she only speaks Spanish. They would translate, or they will tell her, you know what, just stop eating rice, beans, tortillas. And that's frustrating for a Hispanic, a Mexican woman, right? That she grew up with those foods. And so I would just see her really frustrated. Like, what do you mean I have to stop eating those foods? So there was no other guidance. And in my mind, I was like, there has to be a career, right, in nutrition that provides more guidance to the population when they're trying to manage a condition like type 2 diabetes. And so I think that's, that was the first time I thought about nutrition. But I wanted to really talk to you about how, let's say you have a client that comes to you, right? And before we started recording, you mentioned that you work with a good majority of your clients are Hispanic and Filipino, right? So let's talk about maybe the similarities there in those two cultures.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing that up because I do see a lot of similarities with a lot of Hispanic clients and patients and Filipinos. Number one is just the patterns that I see is they love to fry their foods. For Filipinos, they fry their fish, their meats, their pork. With my Hispanic clients just this Saturday, they said chicharron with guacamole. They heat up their tortillas in oil. They put oil in their refried beans. They fry their meat. They fry their chicken. So one of the things I see parallel is just the frying in food in general. That's number one. Number two, another thing that I noticed with a lot of my Hispanic clients and Filipino is the social aspect. Hispanics, Mexicans, that whole community is very family oriented. So if family goes out, my Hispanic clients, they kind of have to go along with it. And it's hard to break the norm sometimes, especially if all your family is wanting to do it, or if your family offers you food. It's the same thing with a lot of Filipinos. They'll go out to eat. There are a lot of celebrations. They feel like they have to do it. So they'll do it. And when they're in that environment, it's really hard to say no, or you feel kind of like a pressure around you to eat. That's number two. Number three, I noticed a lot of my Hispanic and Filipino clients love carbs. In the Hispanic side, it's tortillas and rice. On the Filipino side, it's a lot of rice, white rice, just plain white rice. But it's a very staple thing for a lot of Filipinos. And the Hispanic side, tortillas and rice are something that they tell me they have a hard time resisting. Like this Saturday when I worked, that's one of the topics that we talked about. And he said, I don't have to give up tortillas to lose weight. It's like, no, you don't need to. And because what he read in the internet is he had to get rid of his tortillas. So we kind of worked around it to make sure it's a little bit more balanced. But those are the three things I picked up on as far as similarities.
Yeah, a lot of similarities, right, into both cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're so right with everything. I have to attest to that for sure. But it's so amazing to see, the reaction of clients when you tell them, no, you don't have to eliminate rice or you don't have to eliminate tortillas, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about being able to keep them and like have that balance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard when you read this on the internet, right, or when you hear it by someone that has no nutrition background, right, or the
Yeah.
education, and then they struggle, right, because who's not going to struggle with like something that is part of their culture, part of them growing up, and like you said, the environment, like if grandma's making homemade tortillas and you say, oh man, I can't have tortillas, but they smell so good, right? Most likely, you're going to do it. And now,
Mm-hmm.
we won't go into that more in depth, right? But there's all this guilt and there's all this shame, and you're like, man, like what's the point of continuing, right? If I already messed up, and we know that that's not the case. It's
Yeah, exactly.
way above that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty amazing to see that specifically, right? I wanted to mention too, maybe we can talk a little bit about that specifically as well.
Yeah.
Is the frying of things, right? It of course is going to bring flavor, right? Frying something brings the flavor. It makes foods more palatable, right? You desire them more. But
Yeah.
if we were to visually look, right, like what 2 tablespoons of oil look like, right, in calorie wise, sometimes we don't think about how much that comes into play, right, in terms of our goals,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't. It's not that you see it on your plate, right? Okay, this is a quarter cup of oil that you're eating, right? But it is absorbed into the food. It's not that it disappears, right? Like it's in the food. And so I feel that sometimes when you don't really see something, right, or visualize something, it's harder to understand. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you help your clients visualize that? How do you help your clients maybe change that into maybe a healthier way of making their meals?
So what I do with my clients, whether it's Hispanic or Filipino, I first tell them how much 1 tablespoon is. And then I ask calorie wise, and then I ask them how much oil do you put. Majority of time people do not measure. They'll just pour it and they won't even think about it. And it's fine because they've never really learned that that much oil does add up over time. So I tell them the calorie wise. And then for illustration purposes, to be more graphic, whether Hispanic or Filipino, I often compare it to a burger. So I'll put 3 tablespoons equals, I don't know, a cheeseburger at McDonald's. So I'll make that comparison, and I'll be saying, this much oil every time you eat this is equivalent from a calorie standpoint, this much cheeseburger. So basically, you're eating cheeseburger every single day. So they'll put their head down like this, and they'll say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even know I was eating that much." That's another way of doing it. Another way of illustrating how much oil they use is I will pull up my Instagram because I have a video on my Instagram of pouring the oil of how much it is. I'll show that to my clients, whether Hispanic or Filipino. I'll show them how much 1 tablespoon looks like. And a lot of them are surprised. It's not a lot. And then I tell them, if you're pouring this much, you're probably pouring more than a tablespoon, 4, 5, 6. And if you're frying your food every single day, every single meal, it will certainly add up. So by just attacking it in different angles, um, I find that a lot of my clients will understand that these oils can be quote unquote hidden and kind of be absorbed in the food, and it doesn't really add too much to your satiety because it's absorbed in the food. It doesn't feel like it's 600 calories or 500 calories. So 3 different ways to approach on how I educate my clients.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the visuals, right? Because it really helps versus like, oh, 1 tablespoon is, I don't know, 100 calories or 200 calories.
Yeah.
Because you're like, if you don't see it, right, it's difficult to like really understand it. Or if you don't compare it with something that, they can visualize and be like, okay, he said that if I eat this many tablespoons of oil, I'm eating these many hamburgers, right? It really creates that image.
Exactly.
And so it helps, right? Where you're like, oh man, I don't want to eat 3 hamburgers.
Yeah.
Like so many.
Is that how do you tell your clients, Lilian? How do you explain this much oil? Do you have a strategy that you do?
I do the measuring spoons too, right?
Okay.
And measure it out. So sometimes I have them try it at home, right? Like if you want to
Okay. That makes
still
sense.
cook your foods, right? Measure out how much you want to do. At least you'll have a visual as well, and you're aware of it, right? You're mindful of it.
That's a
But
good
you're
way.
right. Usually they don't even have measuring spoons because we don't use them, right? At least in the Hispanic community, even when we're cooking, even with, my grandma making her recipes. Yeah, just like a little bit of that and like a sprinkle of that. And I'm like, Ken, do you know how much? No, just do it. I'm like, oh no.
That's what I hear
You
from a
know?
lot of my Hispanic and Filipino clients. Just you just pour it.
Right. Like, well,
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, and that's usually that's how things are, how generations, right? We continue to
Hmm.
do those things.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, great point. So we make this change, right? Let's say we visualize these things, and we made the comparisons, right, between the two cultures. So you have a Filipino patient, right, that is coming to you, and maybe to manage a specific chronic condition, let's say diabetes. How do you approach, right, the education and like the change in behavior and change in nutrition? How do
Yeah.
you go about that?
So the first thing I ask them is, what do you know about diabetes and nutrition? Um, for a lot of my patients or clients, they will say something along the lines of stop eating sugar, stop eating bread, stop eating, you know, bread, sugar, tortillas, stop eating any of those variations. And then I'll try to get an understanding of how much they know, what do they know, and then I'll try to explain to them that our body needs carbohydrates. You don't need to have a all or nothing approach, and I'll try to explain to them that you do need carbohydrates, especially if you're a type 2 diabetes, because I get patients and clients that have pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and what I explain to them is that you do need carbohydrates, but we need to figure out what is right for you. And then I'll go into their height and weight, their physical activity, and then I'll usually figure out what they need in moderation. So when for a lot of my Filipino clients, when I tell them that they can have white rice, they almost kind of shake their head or they kind of don't believe it because they've been told, whether it's social media, Google, that they have to have brown rice instead of white rice. In Filipino, everyone loves white rice. Not many love the brown rice. For my Hispanic clients, they like the white rice too. Sometimes they fry their rice for the Mexican rice with tomato. I tell them you don't have to necessarily quote unquote have brown rice, but if you do have, or yeah, you do have to moderate how much rice you put. And here in my office, I do have illustration like pictures and graphics to give them an idea of how much rice they need. So, in summary, to kind of figure out for my patients and clients, I find out what they know and I try to fill in the gaps and try to explain them why what their initial belief is may not be so true. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I have to kind of develop a rapport or trust with them because eventually they do turn away.
I love that you mentioned that when you tell them no, you can have it, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes it's difficult, especially even if maybe a healthcare provider has told them don't
yeah,
eat the white rice,
that's
right?
so true. I hear
But
that
then
all
when
the
they
time
and they
too.
hear we are as dietitians, like, no, you can actually have it. And they're like, well, do I believe you or do I believe the doctor, right? Or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
healthcare provider? And you're
I
like,
don't want to go against the doctor, but I have to spin it in a way without putting down the physician or the provider.
exactly. Right, absolutely. And you're correct, right? It's all about the amount. So if we're thinking about, okay, are you having a whole half of your plate rice, right? Um, then yeah, let's work on maybe adding more of a balance, giving you more other nutrients that
Yeah.
you feel satiated. Oftentimes, and this happens with my Hispanic population, right? That they want to add more tortillas, right? Because they wanna feel satiated. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't have tortillas, like I feel like I didn't eat, right? But
Hmm.
oftentimes it's most because maybe we're missing something, right? Like let's look at your plate. Let's see if maybe we're missing a food group that we can add it and you feel more satiated. And so instead of having 6 tortillas, now you have 2 tortillas, right? Or
Yeah.
3. And so
Yeah.
that alone makes a huge difference, right?
It makes a huge difference. And a lot of my Hispanic and Filipino clients, another thing that they just don't eat a lot of vegetables, period. Do you find that in yours as well?
Yes. Maybe if they have fish, they might have tomatoes and maybe like iceberg lettuce or something like that. Nopales, we do eat nopales, like cactus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it is so interesting because like if you go into like if you go into Mexico, right, and you really see, okay, what is the nutrition of like the population here? You see vegetables, right? You see chayote, you see the nopales, you see tomatoes, your salsas. You might not see like broccoli or cauliflower or carrots, but you see these other vegetables.
Mm.
And so oftentimes you might think, oh, or they might think, oh, do I have to eat broccoli? And so that's when we come in and we're like, no, you can have any other vegetables, right, that you
Yeah.
want to enjoy. It doesn't have to be broccoli if you hate broccoli, right? Like
Yeah.
if you go into a farmer's market, right, or an auction or whatever, you're going to see all these vegetables, right? So giving them a try. But you're
Mm.
absolutely right. I also see that we're not
Okay.
adding a lot of vegetables.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so funny too because um, a lot of my, especially for a lot of my Hispanic and Filipino, another thing I noticed, if they've immigrated here from a different country, from one of in the Americas or Philippines, the thing that I pick up on is that they start gaining weight. And then the environment for the fast food is more easily accessible. And for a lot of my Filipino Hispanic clients, since they come here, they make more money, things are easier to get. That we have DoorDash, Uber Eats, fast food. It's so easy now. Whereas in Philippines or some parts of Latin America, it's not as easy. Money is a little bit harder to come by. So those things too, I forgot about that. The common thing is for Hispanic and Filipinos when they come here, they gain more weight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because growing up, I grew up in Mexico, right? And so I think they had just started like the Domino's Pizza, right? They just started appearing, but they were not close to my hometown. We had to take a bus, right, to go and get Domino's
Wow.
Pizza, bring the Domino's Pizza and put in the bus. And so, yeah, you're right. Like the accessibility of food plays a huge role, right? We
Mm.
had like pizza places, but there's this new thing, right? This new pizza place and it's Domino's. And I remember one time, my mom and I went, like, let's go, and let's go on the bus and bring the Domino's
So,
pizza. And like everybody was smelling the pizza. But yeah, you're absolutely correct, right? It's the accessibility of food. And obviously when you have more access to food, to those types of food that you're not used to, right? You're like, oh, I want to try all of them
it makes a
because they're so
difference. Yeah.
good, right? Like it's a luxury. Now I can afford it, right? Like you're
Hmm.
right. It's a money wise too. And
Yeah.
so you almost feel like you have to reward yourself, right? Because you are able to afford that food now.
Yeah.
And even though we know that replacing your cultural foods, right, with these more high calorie foods, right, that's when we start to see, that weight gain, those weight
Exactly.
related issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great point to definitely also pinpoint. And so
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
interesting to see that change, that acculturation, right, and the change of environment.
Yeah. Makes a difference.
It does. Yeah. And we're not here, right, to say, oh, no, you should stop eating those foods, right? Or should change the way that you consume your cultural foods. But more so, right, how can we make those foods fit in and also healthier, right, to help you with your specific goals, whatever that is, if it's weight management, if it's more chronic condition management, right?
Hmm.
We're here to provide that support as
Yes,
well.
exactly. Having the strategy uh, with your lifestyle and situation, and sometimes cultural too. Since working with a lot of Hispanics, I've kind of picked up on a lot of things, and you kind of see the patterns, similar patterns. I'm sure you've seen too. Well, it's very similar for a lot of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think it is nice though to see that change, right, when they come to see, especially if they are sent from the doctor's office, right? You get a referral. for them to see you. They're almost coming to you like resisting, right? Like, what are you gonna tell me? Are you gonna tell me not to eat my food, or are you gonna tell me not to, to eliminate my foods? But as you talk to them, right, they kind of change. They're like, okay, I can listen to you. You're not taking away my food, right? And I think that's how it should be. We're here not to like be a food police, right, or to be like stop eating that. Like we're to give you a strategy, right, to help you with your goals.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. So how do you see your clients or patients transition, right, from when they start seeing you to like now that you're working with them, right? Like how long does it take you? And I know I'm sure this is different from patient to patient, but on average, right, for them to make these changes, maybe change some behaviors or add more wholesome foods?
So for it depends for a lot of the patients that I do. I divide them to, I try to figure out where they are and what they know. And sometimes I have to take into consideration clients or patients that have low literacy. Typically, they will come from Medicaid or Medi-Cal side. So I kind of have to work with what they know, what type of access of food they have, and the culture. Because sometimes whether it's Hispanic or Filipino, sometimes they live with other people. And if those other people are cooking fried foods, frying the rice, whether whatever culture it's gonna make it harder. So I try to get an assessment first, and then I try to figure out what is the next step. Meaning that's just me asking questions. And usually, what I find out once I ask a lot of questions, themes start coming up: fast food, frying foods, a lot of Coke, frying meats. Those are the things for Filipinos. Fast food too, fried foods, a lot of rice, not a lot of physical activity. So with my low literacy clients or patients, or maybe the ones that don't know a lot to begin with, I will start with very, very basic ones, Leonela. So I'll tell them, whoever the cook in your household is, is there a way for you guys to compromise? Sometimes I have clients or patients, if the mom is cooking, they don't want to tell their mom anything. They don't want to tell their mom to cook, to change it to that, because for some reason they don't. So I'll tell them, well, if you're not comfortable with that, let's work on something else. Typically, it's the carbohydrate portion. The tortillas, we go from 10 to 8 to 6. Sometimes the rice portion, I'll tell them, is there a way to reduce that? And just like you said, if they reduce their tortilla or rice portion, they may not feel as satiated, or they might not feel as full. So I'll ask them, do you guys have a lot of vegetables and fruits? And they'll typically say they do, but they don't really eat it. So I'll try to have a conversation with them, that, these vegetables are really good for you. They help you stay full. You don't have to have a salad. So I'll tell for a lot of my Hispanic clients, you can make it into like a vegetable, caldo de vegetable. I'll just say that. Whatever the Hispanic equivalent is, can you make it into a soup? Do you like salsa? Since I've talked to a lot of Hispanic clients, I kind of know what the dishes are. And then once I start doing that, their brains kind of start running, because they'll think automatically, oh, I have to eat salad. I have to eat bland foods. They don't have to do that, because sometimes, whether it's Hispanic or Filipino, sometimes they don't like salad. So they'll tell them, just do the soup but make it vegetable. Or just do it the way you want it to be. Just put more vegetables. I'll try to work with whatever capacity a patient or client has, because you kind of have to meet them where they're at, especially for low literacy clients. I try to keep it simple, and then every time we meet up, it ranges between 2 to 6 weeks. I try to add something to it, whether they've done well or they've not done so well. So that's kind of like how I approach things.
I love that strategy about making it like a soup type of thing, right? Because we definitely love soups.
Yeah.
So I think adding extra veggies, and I do see that actually that they eat more veggies when they do like a caldo, right, or like some kind of soup, because they're already in there, and they're like, oh, it's part of it, right? I can eat it. So yeah, that's a brilliant idea to like just make it add more vegetables, right?
Yeah, it works for the Filipino community because they love a lot of soups, and the Hispanic community because in our area there's a lot of Mexican restaurants and they offer vegetable dishes. They just don't eat them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's interesting. Sometimes it could also be that they've never had them, right? And they're like, "Oh, what if I don't like it?" And now, like, I wasted my money on something like that, right?
Yeah, like they stick to their what they know. Usually it's tortillas, chicharron with guacamole, carne asada, anything fried, and that's what they're kind of like their bread and butter is. They're familiar with it. So sometimes it takes a lot of convincing for me to tell them it's okay if you cut the portion in half. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, like you said, meeting them where they're at, right? And they being able to be okay with that and like going at their own pace. Like it's okay.
Exactly.
This is your plan. This is your journey. I'm just here as a guide, right? As a mentor. So
Yeah,
it's okay. We're going slow. No, there's not a race, right? Nobody's racing
exactly.
against you. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's pretty good. Has there been a Filipino dish that you found that changing it made it like healthier in a way, but it still kept like that flavor or
Yeah, there's a dish. I don't know if you have laptop in front of you, but there's a dish called pinakbet. Pinakbet. If you look that up, it's a Filipino stir fry vegetable dish. It's like if you look at it, it can be colorful.
yeah, there's lots of colors there.
Yeah. Problem is, for a lot of Filipinos, they use a lot of oil to fry it. That's number one. Number two is the meat they put, it's pork belly. That's number two. And that's not the and then when they do the pork belly, they fry the pork belly. So they fry the vegetables, they fry the pork belly, and they put a lot of shrimp paste. We use shrimp paste to make it salty, to give it that umami flavor. So that frying the vegetables, frying the pork belly, using a lot of shrimp paste adds the calorie density of that dish. So when you order at a restaurant or like a fast food place in a Filipino place, often it's really greasy because most Filipinos, they just pour, you know. So a 100 calorie dish becomes a 400, 500, and it's just this small, you know. So what I tell a lot of my Filipino patients and clients, it's like, do you want to pay attention to your oil? Do you know how much oil you're putting in? It's like, is there a way you can avoid pork belly? And one of the things they resist, because pork belly is so good, it's crispy, it's like chicharron, da, 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 you know. So I tell them, instead of frying your pork belly, is there just a way you can just not fry it? And they'll say, oh, but it tastes so good, crispy, it tastes this and this. So, a lot of those changes, a lot of those things that they bring up, similar for my Hispanic clients, because the pork belly is chicharron in the Hispanic side. Filipino, we have chicharron. We just don't dip it in guacamole. We dip it in vinegar. So I have to kind of tell them that this pork belly, it's already fatty enough, and then if you fry it, plus you fry your vegetables, that really makes your vegetables, your food very high calorie. Tell them you don't have to do like, just make sure you pay attention to how much oil you use. And the key really is for a lot of my Hispanic clients, they just don't use too much oil. Like, stop using so much oil. I tell it in my head. Sometimes I get frustrated, but I have to kind of calm down.
Yeah, let me take a break here.
Yeah. But cutting back in the oil, or at least paying attention, because a lot of them don't, you save a lot of calories. And I only talk about calories because, let's just face it, it's part of the how much you're eating. So when I start convincing them, they start making some progress. It's like, oh, it's not really too bad. I didn't know that I was putting half a cup of oil instead of 2 tablespoons. So that's kind of like how I approach it. For the Filipino dishes, I tell them to cut back on the oil and be more wiser with type of meat. Instead of pork belly, can you just do chicken, maybe tofu, maybe shrimp, maybe something else other than the pork belly?
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that resistance for a first, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, and it's not about like eliminating it, right? I'm sure all of it, but if it's something that we consume on a consistent basis, weekly basis, daily basis, or whatever, things add up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then specifically, let's say we're trying to lower our cholesterol, right? All that definitely plays a huge role.
Yeah.
The oils and then the added fat, saturated fat, right, in the meats too.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a lot of and I tell a lot of my Filipino clients and patients, tell them, hey, for when I talk about overweight or obesity, for the Asian population, you don't need to be quote unquote big to develop all these risk factors. In fact, I tell them, if you know something about the BMI or the weight, for a lot of my Filipino or Asian population, they don't need to be overweight compared to other groups, Hispanic, Black, white. For a lot of my Asian clients, you can be a tiny bit overweight and have these high cholesterol, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes. And I tell them, just because you're skinny, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed that you're going to be okay, because it doesn't take that much weight. And a lot of them don't know that you don't need to be very, very overweight or obese to develop all those issues that other groups at that body weight or BMI is experiencing. And a lot of them, it's new information to them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Something to definitely consider, because you're absolutely right. Something when you think about these chronic conditions, but you think, oh, it's only for someone that it has a bigger BMI, right, or bigger body weight. But yeah, absolutely, it could be lower weight, but because of genetics or whatever the case may be, even having a normal BMI, right, or normal weight, you could have those issues already.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have to ask this question because sometimes I get asked this question too as Mexican, right? Like, how becoming a dietitian has changed the way that you eat, more of your traditional foods.
I could ask that too.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I do, there's a couple of big things. On social events, I am pickier with what I eat. They know I'm a dietitian, so I'm more mindful with what I eat. So typically in Filipino dishes, everything's heavy. Meat, fried foods, a lot of rice, and I'll see my plate and it's not as big. That's number one in social settings. Number two, I am way more mindful in how I make my food. So a lot of oil, I don't do that. Frying stuff, it's rare, extremely rare when I fry foods. Even when I fry, I'm still mindful of what I do. Air fryer is a big thing for me now since I've been air frying a lot of stuff. And then I pay attention to how much vegetables I eat every single meal. And usually people are not like that. I'm curious to see how dietitian for you has changed.
Yeah, the same. I don't do a lot of tortillas either. Maybe one. I do eat gorditas, which are made out of like masa, right? My mom makes them, and they're so good. So I can eat 2 or 3 of those. Okay. But I add vegetables and I add tofu, right? In my case, and salsa or avocado. So the same way, right? I'm mindful of, okay, how does my plate look like? Right? Do I have a balance here? Right? Do I have more vegetables? And I see that with my mom too, right? Even when she's making like more of these traditional meals, she's not frying things anymore, right?
Nice.
So she's only like measuring the oil, or she's like, okay, I'm just gonna put a small amount just to get things, cooking, not to like deep fry them, right?
Good.
So, and she adds more vegetables. So it's pretty interesting to see that absolutely, but your environment plays a huge role in how you are going to develop these habits, but having that support too, right? And I think that also plays a huge role as well. So now she's not like frying the beans. She still mashes them, right, to have like refried beans, quote unquote, but they're not, we're not adding lard or we're not adding like extra oil, right? It's just a small amount, mash them up, and then they're still really good.
What about social settings, Leonela? Like when you go to events?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I'm not only a dietitian, Mexican, but I'm also vegan. And so, yeah, that's a tough one for me. So usually they're not going to have a lot of options, but, if there are, frijoles de la olla, so just boiled beans, right? I have boiled beans.
Mhm.
And sometimes the rice is iffy because it might have chicken broth, right? Or it might be fried with lard. So a little bit more cautious there. Definitely no protein for me. So usually, I already know myself. And I think this is another thing that I also tell my clients, depending on what your goals are, right? And depending on how you want to approach this social event. If it makes more sense to eat ahead of time and maybe just go and socialize, and if they're gonna have something that you know that you really want to have, then you'll share that experience, right? But if you go into the event hungry and there's nothing for you, most likely you're gonna be miserable, right? You're not gonna enjoy it. So I usually know that for me, and I tend to eat ahead of time, right? So if I go, I can just socialize, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy for some people. So
Yeah,
sometimes
definitely. I
it's
see a
tough.
lot of that too for my Hispanic clients. Sometimes they feel they have to eat. They feel have to food equals socializing, and if they don't eat, it's kind of not socializing. And it's kind of hard to break the social norms, whether you're Hispanic or Filipino. So it does take a long time to break apart.
Right. Yeah. And I recently just learned, not learned, but I heard a client say, I'm establishing my boundaries, like with like social events, right? If I don't want to eat something, right, and someone offers, I just say no, thank you. I already had some. Or like if they're having more of these goals, right, and they really don't want to have that food, they just stand their ground, right? Which is great. I think it's so important, and it's difficult in like more of our minorities, more on our Hispanic population, speaking from experience, to establish your boundaries, right? Like,
Yeah,
hey, that's not okay. Like, I don't want to do that, right?
I
It's
noticed
tough.
that quite a bit.
Yeah. Sadly, like you just like go along, and you're like, oh, I'm suffering here, but have
Yeah,
to do it. So,
definitely.
but I think that is important too, as well. So I think it really learning about yourself, right? And learning what you want, how you want to approach the situation. Some other tips that I have given my clients, right, is that if you feel comfortable talking to the host, right, whoever is going to be the host of the social event or the party, and asking them, can I bring a dish, right? A dish that you're going to be able to eat and you're going to feel comfortable.
Mm.
And that's, something that it can help them as well. And maybe someone else will try it, right? But at least you'll have something that you'll have on your plate,
It's a
right?
good idea, actually. I've never thought of that.
Yeah. So there you go.
Bring up your own food. Is that what you do? You bring your own food sometimes?
Um, I've had some. I added that in
Okay,
some
nice.
occasions, more so like in like family that I feel comfortable with, and they know, how I eat, and they're like, yeah,
No,
sure, no problem.
I see. It's a smart one.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Okay, John. So we talked about, just to recap quickly, right? We talked about how cultural foods, right, can still fit in even when you're trying to reach your goals, right? Specifically, more so, how to not feel like you have to restrict them, right, or eliminate these foods that you have grown up with, but adding more nutrition to your meals, right? We talked
Hmm.
about extensively how reducing the oils, right, reducing the frying can really benefit.
Yeah,
And now we have the air fryer, right? I use the air fryer a lot too, and so it cuts down time. You don't have to add extra oil, so it's a
exactly. Yeah.
great tool to have.
Hmm.
So using those gadgets, right? And yeah, just adding more nutrients to our meals. What else would you like to add? What other tips would you like to give to like your Filipino population to help them with their
Yeah.
goals?
I see this too for a lot of just not just in the Filipino one, but I point out the Filipino because they're very family oriented with the same thing with the Hispanic that when they go to parties, sometimes they'll not eat all day, all afternoon, and then when they get there, they're ravenous, they're hungry. I said if and I try to tell them, I try to give them like a talk like, hey, if you're having these events a couple times a week and there's no movement in your blood sugar, your weight, and you're going all out with your meals, like have you thought about eating before you actually go? Actually not skipping meals and having a meal before. And I think you touched on that. And some of the things frequently I hear is because, oh, I don't want to eat because all the food there is good, is delicious. I don't want to eat because I want to make sure I eat there. And I tell them, like, if you go all day not eating and you go there, it's going to be harder to make those decisions. And if it's hard for you to make those decisions, there's a chance that you're overeating. And they really equate eating with having fun, So they have to equate that all the time, and it's kind of like a cultural thing because I picked up a lot. Eating is bonding, especially for the ones that are very family oriented. If you don't eat, there seems kind of a shame to it too. So I have to reframe their mind, and sometimes that's hard to change. The mindset, telling them it's okay to eat. It's not like you're not going to talk to your relatives. You can eat something small in that celebration. You're being more mindful since you're not going hungry. And over time, it does kind of pick up on them. And that's with a lot of my Filipino clients because they're very family oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true, right? That if you don't eat all day and you're hungry and you're just pushing that hunger, it's harder to make those healthier decisions, right? When it comes to the event or the social event or the party, because you're just so hungry, right? And you're like, who cares? And then if we're distracted, right? Because we're talking, we're socializing, we almost forget that we're eating, and then we end up eating more, right? More than we otherwise would have. So yeah, great points there, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So don't go all day without eating, right? Because it's not that you're not going to enjoy the food, right? You might enjoy even more because you're not so hungry looking to, be there and just eat. So you're going to have that time to really savor the food, right?
Exactly. Good point. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, John, where can the listeners find you? Where can they reach out to you if maybe they want to make an appointment or just follow you on social media?
Yeah, so they can follow me. I have my Instagram handle, John Canlis RD, and they can follow me there. My website is also johncanlisrd.com. You can actually book an appointment there since I accept majority of insurance and Medi-Cal. So Instagram and the website are the two main ways to reach out to me. My contact information, my fax, if the doctor wants to refer to me, it's all kind of laid out in my website at johncanlisrd.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to add those details in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming back and to do another episode with me. I appreciate your time, and I will talk to you very soon. Thank you, everybody. Remember to stay strong and stay safe. And then I'll talk to you in another episode. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.